Discussing and talking about personal protective equipment or PPE is a very important matter. Having knowledge about it can save your life or the life of your coworker. In reality, sometimes PPE is considered only after the problem occurred or when the problem is already there. This act is very wrong and at the same time very dangerous. The selection of PPE must comply with the existing OSH standards, and using this in the workplace must be combined with training and orientation on their proper use, limitation, and advantages. In order to attain satisfactory performance, you must monitor proper usage and maintenance of PPE. This presentation aims to impart the proper usage of PPE in order to prevent accidents at work. We will start this by defining hazards. So what is hazard? A hazard is anything that produces adverse effect on anyone. Example of hazard are slippery floors, falling objects, chemicals, and many more. These hazardous occurrences are results of unsafe or unhealthy acts that brings unsafe or unhealthy condition in a workplace. Though some hazards are intrinsic in nature, a human is also part of the hazards that we encounter today. So we have here the classification of hazards. So hazards may be classified into direct, physical, chemical, biological, and ergonomic. So let's go first to direct hazards. So direct hazards are very common in companies that utilize oil, water, or any liquid in the production process, and in the construction industry where there are a lot of falling debris like small pieces of wood, nails, and hand tools. Example of direct hazard are unguarded moving parts of machine, falling or flying particles, and slippery floor. Next is physical hazards. Under of it, we have 5 types of physical hazards. First is noise. There is only an allowable time that one worker can stay in a work area without hearing protection. Given by the table, we have allowable exposure to noise. For 8 hours, we have 90 decibels. 4 hours is equal to 95 decibels. 2 hours is equal to 100 decibels. 1 hour is equal to 105 decibels. Second is extreme temperatures. There are 2 types of extreme temperatures, such as extreme heat, which can cause heat stroke, and extreme cold, which can cause hypothermia. Third is radiation. Radiation also has 2 types, the ionizing radiation and the non-ionizing type. Under of ionizing radiation, we have ultraviolet, UV light, or alpha particle. It is from the sun that can be shielded by paper. Next is beta particle. It can penetrate paper but not concrete. Next is gamma ray. It can penetrate concrete. This can be shielded by using lead like in the X-ray room, which is made up of sheeted lead in between concrete to prevent outside exposure. Under of non-ionizing radiation, we have radio waves, electric waves, and infrared rays. Example of these are welding process which produces infrared rays that can damage the skin. 3 safety practices for controlling body exposure to radiation. Time. The shorter the time, the lower exposure received. Distance. The greater the distance, the lower the exposure received. Shielding. May be lead, steel, iron, or concrete. Fourth is extreme pressures. These pressures is beyond the allowable levels needed by the human body. Example of workers exposed to extreme pressure are those involved in excavation work, scuba diving, and piloting airlines. And the fifth and last types of physical hazard is vibration. Next classification is chemical hazards. These are substances in solid, liquid, or gaseous forms known to cause poison, fire, explosion, or ill effect to health. Example of these are gases, vapor, mist, and dust. Those are can cause irritation, discomfort, and even death. Another one is biological hazards. These are hazards caused by viruses, fungi, and bacteria. Examples of these are Salmonella and E. coli. And last but not the least in the classification of hazard is the ergonomic hazard. These are caused by the improper posture or postural stress. Example of this is lifting heavy materials or sitting in the chair for too long without proper posture. Of course, if we discuss the different classification of hazard, we should also discuss the hazard control measure. There are three methods in controlling hazards: engineering, administrative, and PPE or personal protective equipment. The first method is engineering. This is the application of engineering technology to control hazard. Example of this is the machine guarding, which prevent anyone from coming in contact with moving parts of the machine during the operation. And also there are another forms of engineering method, and these are substitution and isolation. Second is the administrative method. This aims to minimize the exposure of humans to workplace hazards and employs administrative approaches such as rotation and shifting. And the last method is PPE or personal protective equipment. These are considered as the last line of defense. These devices provide limited protection to the ones using them.
Program to introduce PPE or personal protective equipment. Once it is decided that personal protective equipment is going to be used, then the following steps need to be undertaken. Number 1, write a policy on the usage of personal protective equipment or PPE and communicate it to employees and visitors as needed. Number 2, select the proper type of equipment. Number 3, implement a true training program. Number 4, ensure that employees knows the correct use and maintenance of the equipment. Number 5, enforce proper use and maintenance of PPE. And for the policy should state that need for the use of PPE. It may also contain exemptions or limitations on the use of PPE. Selections of proper equipment, proper training, several factors influence compliance. Among them are the extent to which the personnel who must wear the equipment understand its necessity, the ease and comfort with which it can be used or work with a minimum of interference with normal work procedures. A training program outline may include describing hazard and or conditions in the workplace, telling what cannot or done about them, explaining why certain types of PPE have been selected, discussing the capabilities and or limitations of the PPE, demonstrating how to use, adjust, and fit PPE, practicing using PPE, explaining the workers how to deal with emergencies, discussing how PPE will be paid for, maintained, prepared, and clean, maintenance program enforcement. And for the uses of PPE, the following are the functions and uses of PPE. Number 1, head protection. Number 2, eye protection. Number 3, face shields. Number 4, air protection. Number 5, respiratory protection. Number 6, hand and arm protection. Number 7, foot and leg protection. And for the last number, full protection. For the number 1, head protection. A safety hat is a device that provides head protection against impact from falling objects and protection against electrocution. Safety hats should be inspected prior to its use. Any of the following defects is a cause for immediate removal of the PPE from service. Suspension system that show evidence of materials cracking, tearing, frying, or other signs of deterioration. Any cracks or perforations of rim or shell, deformations of shell, evidence of exposure to excessive heat, chemicals, or radiation.
Number 2 is eye protection, a device that provides eye protection from hazards caused by flying particles, sparks, light radiation, splashes, and gases. Goggles come in a number of different styles for a variety of such as protecting against dust and splashes. Eye caps, flexible or concussion goggles, plastic eye shield goggles, and foundry men's goggles. Eye protectors must meet the following minimum requirements: provide adequate protection against the particular hazards for which they are designed, be reasonably comfortable when worn under the designated condition, fit snugly without interfering with the movement or vision of the wearer, be durable, be capable of being disinfected, be easily cleaned, be kept clean and in good condition. Number 3 is face shields. Face shields should only be used as eye and face protection in areas where splashing or dust rather than impact resistance is the problem. In the case of grinding operations plus other operation, a face shield is only secondary protection to other protective devices such as safety goggles. Number 4 is ear protection. Protect the ear from the hazard caused by excessive noise, a noise exceeding 85 to 90 decibels or more on 8-hour exposure. Examples of these are earplug, ear muffs, and canal caps. The prevention of excessive noise exposure is only way to avoid hearing damage. Engineering and administrative controls must be used if acceptable sound levels are exceeded. If such controls fail to reduce the sound levels to acceptable limits, personal hearing protection must be used. Earmuffs must make a perfect seal around the ear to be effective. Number 5 is respiratory protection. Respiratory protection is required when engineering improvements and administrative controls can't eliminate risk. Engineering controls include isolation of the source of contaminants, design process or procedural changes, etc. Administrative controls, on the other hand, include monitoring, limiting, working exposure, training and education, etc. The hazards are mist of vapors, gases, smoke, fumes, particulates or dust, and insufficient oxygen supply. The types of respirators are divided into two categories. Number 1 is air purifying respirators. It is divided into two: the particulate respirators or mechanical filters and the chemical cartridge devices. The particulate respirators or mechanical filters screen out dust, fog, fume, mist, spray, or smoke. Such as filters need to be replaced at frequent intervals. And the chemical cartridge devices remove contaminants by passing the tainted air through material that traps the harmful portions. There are specific cartridges for specific contaminants. This should be used and no substitution should be made. Number 2 is the air supplying devices, divided into two: self-contained and supplied air respirators. The self-contained are those where the air supply is easily transportable and they protect against toxic gases and lack of oxygen. A common example is the self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, where the air tank is strapped to the wearer back. The supplied air respirators get air through an air line or hose. The breathable air is supplied by an air compressor or uncontaminated ambient air. The air contaminants are divided into four types: gaseous, particulate, combination of gaseous and particulate, and oxygen deficiency. One is gaseous contaminants include gases and vapors. The particulate contaminants include dust, fumes, mist, fog, and smoke. The combination contaminants usually consist of gaseous materials, and particulates and result from operations such as paint spraying. And the last one is the oxygen deficient atmosphere. are those that have less than 19.5% by volume. They often occur in confined spaces and are considered to be immediately dangerous to life and health. Number 6 for the uses of personal protective equipment is hand and arm protection. Hand and arm protection is required when workers' hands are exposed to hazardous such as harmful substances that can be absorbed by the skin, severe cuts or laceration, severe abrasions, chemical burns, thermal burns, and temperature extremes. Example of hand protection, appropriate gloves, hand pads, barrier cream, sleeves for arm protection. The hazards are pinch points, hot surface, chemical substances, sharp objects, and electrical. The following is a guide to the most common types of protective work gloves and the type of hazards they can guard against. A. Metal mesh, leather or canvas glove. Provide protection against cuts, burns, and sustained heat. B. Fabric and coated fabric gloves. These gloves are made of cotton or other fabric to provide varying degrees of protection. C. Chemical and liquid resistant gloves. Gloves made of rubber, latex, nitrile, or butyl, plastic or synthetic rubber-like materials such as neoprene protect workers from burns, irritation, and dermatitis caused by contact with oils, grease, solvents, and other chemicals. The use of rubber gloves also reduces the risk of exposure to blood and other potentially infectious substances. The number 7 is the foot and leg protection. Hazards are falling or rolling objects, sharp objects, hot surface, wet and slippery surface, and electricity. There are two types of safety shoes, the conductive shoes and the electrical hazard safety shoes. The conductive shoes protect against the buildup of static electricity or equalize the electrical potential between the personnel and the ground. These shoes should be worn only for specific tasks for which they are designed and should be removed at the task completion and not used as general purpose footwear. The electrical hazard safety shoes are non-conductive and protect against open circuits of 600 volts or less under dry conditions. The insulating qualities may be compromised if the shoes are wet, the rubber sole is worn out, or the metal particles are embedded in the sole or heel. Electrical hazards shoes are not intended for use in explosive or hazardous location where conductive footwear is required. This footwear should only be in conjunction with insulated surface.
Number 8. Fall protection. Travel restraint system, fall arrest system, and lifelines are all fall protection. Travel restraint system is an assembly composed of body belt and proper accessories that prevent a worker in a high elevation working area from traveling to an edge where the occurrence of fall may happen. Fall arrest system is an assembly composed of full body harness, safety lanyard, and proper accessories or a safety net, which protect a worker after a fall by stopping the fall before hitting the surface below. And last is the lifelines. Lifelines shall be secured above the point of operation to an anchorage or the other structural member. Number 9. Torso or full body protection. A device that is used to protect us from bodily harm or injury. Workplace hazards that could bodily injury include the following: intense heat, splashes of hot metals and other hot liquids, impact from tools, machinery, and other materials, cuts, hazardous chemicals, contact with potentially infectious materials like blood, and radiation. These protective clothing come in a variety of materials, each suited for particular hazards. These materials include the following, like paper-like fiber, treated wool and cotton, duck, leather, rubberized fabrics, neoprene, and plastics. An example of these materials and equipments are coveralls, reflective safety vest, scrubs, full body harness, cold weather covertails, lab coat, wielding coat, cooling vent, wielding apron, flame resistant splash protective lab coat. Rule 1080. Rule 1080 of the Occupational Safety and Health Standards, OSH, requires employers to provide appropriate personal protective equipment to workers. Employers can be held liable if they fail to furnish their workers with the necessary PPE. 1081 General Probation. 1081.01 Every employer shall at his her expense furnish his or her workers with the protective equipment for eyes, face, hands, and feet, protective shields and barriers whenever necessary by reason of hazardous nature of the process or environment, chemical or radioactive or the other mechanical irritants or hazards capable of causing injury or impairment in the function of any part of the body through absorption, inhalation, or physical contact. 1081.02 All protective equipment shall be approved and designed by construction appropriate for the exposure and the work to be performed. 1081.03 The employer shall be responsible for adequacy and proper maintenance of personal protective equipment used in his workplace. 1081.04 No person shall be subjected or exposed to hazardous environmental condition without protection.
When must I provide PPE or personal protective equipment? You must provide PPE for employees if 1. Their work environment presents a hazard or is likely to present a hazard to any part of their bodies. 2. Their work processes present a hazard or are likely to present a hazard to any part of their body. 3. During their work, they might come into contact with hazardous chemicals, radiation, or chemical irritant. 4. You are unable to eliminate their exposure or potential exposure to the hazard by engineering, work practice, or administrative control.
If employees wear eyeglasses with prescription lenses, may I consider this as an eye protection? The answer is no, because eyeglasses with prescription lenses doesn't have any protection for you to be protected against workplace hazards. But if there's an employee with poor eyesight or wears a contact lens, then the employer must provide an eye protection, for example, a goggles with an protective lenses that meets the requirement of their eyesight for the employee's better vision.
Could employees wearing hard hats and working at elevations create a potential hazard for the employees working below? To protect employees working below, you must provide chin strap for the protective helmets worn by employees working at higher elevations such as area lift or at the edge of a pit. The chin straps should be designed to prevent the hard hats from being bumped off the employees' heads.
Is there a kind of gloves that will protect us from our workplace hazard? The answer is no. The nature of hazards and the operation to be performed will be determine your selection of gloves. The variety of potential occupational hand injuries may make the selecting a pair of gloves more difficult than choosing other protective equipments. Exercise care in choosing gloves designed for the particular circumstance of the workplace. Why should workers be outfitted with the more expensive industrial respirators when look-alike nuisance masks are available? The answer is respirators filter toxic dust and mist commonly found in industrial manufacturing settings, such as welding, grinding, sanding, and maintenance or repair applications. Respirators meet the minimum performance standards and the government-approved agencies certify them. A nuisance dust mask, on the other hand, has no approved government certification, and meets no government performance standards. Noise and dust masks should not be used when exposures to hazardous conditions may exist. The filtration efficiency of a noise and dust mask is lower, and the face seal around the nose and the mouth is less effective than the approved respirators.
Is cotton sufficient as earplugs? Plain cotton does not effectively protect against occupational noise. You may, however, choose from the several products that are effective at protecting your employees' hearing. Appropriate hearing protector includes single-use earplugs, preform or molded earplugs, canal cups, and ear muffs. Once I have selected the specific PPE for my worker, how do I make sure they use it properly? The answer is, train your worker to use the protective equipment. Teach them to know why the PPE are necessary as well as the specific hazard in their work area. How the PPE will provide protection to them. The limitation of PPE. How to properly put on the protective equipment. How to identify signs of wear such as scuff, crack, holes, and etc. How to clean and maintain the PPE. And the last one is the company PPE policy, rules, and regulation.